Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to my latest mega review, where we don't just review the movie itself, but everything that went into making the movie what it was. Today we are going to talk about the 80s action movie that just oozes coolness out of every alien orifice, and that is Aliens, plural, sequel. This is a movie where you can actually forget how cool it is until you go back and rewatch it. It's just such a great film.
You're just too bad.
It was made 7 years after the Ridley Scott original movie of Alien, and it was released in 1986. And interestingly, James Cameron was actually making this right after he finished filming of The Terminator, and The Terminator had not yet been released. But because the executives and all that saw how good The Terminator was, they immediately put him onto this. But for a lot of the crew working on the film, James Cameron was just some nobody. He's just some guy that got the job out of nowhere. They hadn't seen any work he had done yet, so a lot of them thought he was going to mess it up. But because it was so soon after Terminator, to save time in casting, he just moved a lot of the actors in, so we see a lot of the same actors. And this is another example of a filmmaker who produces the best quality work under pressure. He had short amount of time, limited budget, and with only 6 xenomorph suits. Only 6. Like in this scene where they're all crawling through the roof, that's all of the suits in one shot right there. But he managed to create such a great movie. And to put it in context, the year after Aliens came out, Superman 4 came out, and just take a look at the special effects in that movie as opposed to Aliens. There's a vast difference there, and they had roughly the same budget. This is when James Cameron was at his hungriest as a director, and you can see the passion in this film. Let's get into it.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Word has it that a lot of the executives who worked on this film didn't want Sigourney Weaver to come back. They actually wanted a male lead to take over the Aliens franchise. Their logic being that there wasn't a huge amount of female horror movie fans who enjoyed the first Alien, so they figured maybe getting a male actor to take on the role would sort of be better, it would play more to their audiences, so there's a certain logic there. But James Cameron, always having his instincts attuned, at least in those early years, knew that you have to bring Sigourney Weaver back, and he made it a point that you have to bring her back, and she did come back. Ironically though, Sigourney Weaver apparently didn't know that she was going to be using guns in this movie.
It's actually hard for me morally to justify being in a film with so many guns. I just find it very upsetting, and that's the biggest problem for me, is that reading the script, I had no idea how martial the atmosphere would be and how much emphasis that would have. I give money to anti-gun legislation, and I mean, I never even go to see movies about guns, especially killing people. I can't, I just think, I think it would be very difficult for an actor to do. You'd really have to sort of do a number on yourself,
I love shooting the guns. That's like the best part of my job.
Seriously, how do you not pick up, even just skimming the script, that there's going to be a lot of shooting and military stuff in this movie? I don't know. And also, with some of the other crazy stuff that's in this movie, the guns is kind of the tamest part of it, but hey, whatever. Sigourney Weaver and Carrie Henn, who played Newt, became very close, and they keep in touch even to this very day. Carrie Henn had no acting experience when she started this, but she was just picked off her own merits of just being able to play the part. And the brother that we see in some of the early scenes was actually her brother in real life.
There was an incredible bond by the end of the film between Sigourney and Carrie, especially given that Carrie had no experience as an actor prior to doing Aliens. She hadn't even, from my recollection, appeared in a school play, and yet she was so perfect as Newt. She really had to show fear, especially in the scene when the alien rises up. And she was completely convincing. We also wanted to make sure that psychologically, considering this is a pretty dark and scary movie, we had long discussions with her parents and with her about whether or not she would in any way be traumatized by the experience, and she was
perfectly fine, and she realized it was all make-believe.
Some changes were made to the designs of the different aliens. The facehugger, for example, this is the first time where they actually added arms to the creature to sort of, that it's like pulling itself out of someone's chest when it's bursting out as well. This was also a parallel to the Vietnam War and the whole sort of colonial marines' arrogance of how they can just go in and take anything because they got the best technology, the best weapon, the best everything. How could anyone ever beat them?
We got tactical smart missiles, phased plasma pulse rifles, RPGs. We got sonic electronic ball breakers.
That mirrors America's attitude in going up against the Viet Cong in the Vietnam War. The sound effects in this movie as well just really help to sort of flesh out this universe. And it feels like a tactile, real environment with real technology. Just listen to that pulse rifle. Really, I think the pulse rifle, just the sound effects of that, should be up alongside the lightsaber as just sort of iconic and recognisable.
The smart guns we modelled on an MG42 German machine gun. They were quite adaptable in terms of hiding the magazine within a new sort of conceptual shape for the gun.
What we've done is mounted it on a Steadicam harness, which is basically used for cameras. The gun itself, we've tried to disguise it. We've mixed it up with 250 Kawasaki motorcycle parts. Here you have the indicator unit. Here you have the back supports for the pillion rider. And at the back here, you have a clutch cable, which is linked to the trigger mechanism.
This knife trick was actually real too. Lance Henriksen had practiced this many times, and yes, they did speed up the footage, but that's actually Lance Henriksen doing that, and apparently he was also hungover at the time, so it's impressive that he could do that. And then bringing in Bill Paxton's hand into it, that was not scripted, they just did that as an improv. So that's a half genuine, half improvised reaction from Bill Paxton there.
Thank you. That wasn't funny, man.
And despite James Cameron being notoriously vicious on set with people, they still had time to do a few pranks.
There was one instance where we, unbeknownst to anyone, strapped a balloon to Sigourney's saddle, connected to an air pipe. So whenever she sat on the saddle, we could pump the balloon up, and she was wondering what the hell John was doing behind her with this movement going on from the saddle.
Yeah. Well, I think, I'm not sure who, I guess it was John, the guy in back, who blew up this balloon behind me in a certain area while we were shooting one of the big scenes. And I remember going, what's happening back there?
She thought he was getting a boner all the time. She go, Jan, what are you doing, Jan? Because she couldn't move because she's strapped in. And he didn't know because he was nowhere to be seen because he was behind all this black.
By the way, the South Koreans have actually built an Ed 209, so watch out, North Korea, they're coming for you.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
So the plot of the story is that Ripley is found floating in space in her hibernation sleep, just as we saw her at the end of the first movie. However, it turns out she's been floating around space for 57 years. That's like someone going to sleep in 1961 and waking up today. That's a long time. It's actually impressive that Weyland-Yutani was even still the corporation around all that time later. Whole businesses have risen and fallen over time. But Sigourney Weaver continues to be awesome, and what I like about her, not trying to be rude to Sigourney Weaver, but she looks like a normal woman. She doesn't look like a supermodel, she doesn't look like someone who shouldn't be there. You actually buy her as a real woman. And as they had to cut out 16 minutes of the theatrical version to sort of trim it down to size because it went very long, the whole storyline of Ripley finding out that her daughter that she left back on Earth is now dead because she was in hypersleep for so long, all of that initially was cut out, but Sigourney Weaver fought hard to have it put back into the film. She even threatened to leave because she wanted it back. She wanted that motivation there for her character to sort of help solidify the bond between her and Newt, that she's lost one daughter, now she's not going to lose another one. And she conquers her fear of the aliens in order to go in and save Newt. And it's indeed one of the best parts of the movie. And I really do like this sort of ragtag family unit that comes out of this movie of Ripley, Newt, Hicks. I would have loved to see the three of them together again, but of course, Aliens 3 didn't have it turn out that way. Such a shame. Let's hope that Neil Blomkamp Aliens 5 thing will actually pick up where it left off.
And if they are going to cast an older Newt, maybe that chick from Birdman or perhaps Juno Temple. She's a little known actress, but she was Catwoman's sort of sidekick in Dark Knight Rises. She was in Year One.
It's pretty suggestive.
I wouldn't read too much into that.
Okay, now she's just asking for some splinters.
Either one of them would probably do a good job, but who knows? Who knows? And the thing about this movie is, Weyland-Yutani, we all know they're the evil corporation, especially in the first and the third ones, but when you look at their actions in this movie alone, Weyland-Yutani is actually not that evil. Burke is, but a lot of the stuff that Burke does, he's doing on his own, independent from the company. I mean, the company itself, they really grill Ripley at the beginning of the movie about all these crew members that died, the ship that blew up, all this sort of stuff, but they don't press charges against her, and they basically just let her go on to live her life. They do take away her flight credentials, possibly because she's 57 years out of date, so she's probably not up to date with a lot of the technology of how these planes fly now. And when she's flipping out about all these aliens on LV-426, they've already had colonists on there for 20 years who have never complained about any of this, so from their perspective, yeah, she is a little bit crazy, because they're like, well, it's been 20 years, no one else has said anything like this, but now this crazy woman who's 57 years out of date suddenly says there are. It sounds a little crazy. You can understand where they're coming from. And when circumstances change and they lose contact with a colonist, they offer her flight credentials back. They're actually pretty reasonable, all things considered. And I can't help but wonder, if the Weyland-Yutani in the first Alien movie was so evil that they sent them down there to LV-46 on company orders to get this organism, they know it's there. So what has the company been doing over the last 57 years? Why haven't they sent someone else there to get it? Did Weyland himself die and there was a change in management and they don't care anymore? I don't know. I mean, they had 57 years to get this stuff, and 20 years of colonists living there who could have gotten this stuff, but it takes Ripley to come back. I don't know, whatever. It's a minor plot hole. Burke does a good enough job as being the corporate douche, and I actually like that he seems to have no fear of the aliens whatsoever. Everyone else is freaking out about that, but he's not, because his greed of how much money he can make selling these as bioweapons has kind of overtook his brain and sort of clouded out his fear and everything else. I mean, he does show fear right before he dies. But apart from that, he's just sort of an embodiment of greed and sleaziness, and he does a good job. There is a quick throwaway line in Aliens that has had people scratching their heads for a very long time, and it's this.
Hey, you sure wouldn't mind getting some more of that Arcturian poontang? Remember that?
Yeah, bro, the one that you had was male.
It doesn't matter when it's Arcturian, baby.
Now, there's almost no information expanding on who the Arcturians are, and the first time I saw the movie, I just assumed Arcturian is like some colony on some planet called Arcturia, so the people who live there are called Arcturians. But that second line of like, hey, the one you had was male, doesn't matter if it's Arcturian, baby, seems to imply that they're actually aliens, and the little bit of information that we do have on Arcturians in this universe is that yes, they are indeed aliens. They're actually the first sentient alien life form that humans in this cinematic universe have sort of come into contact with before. And it's also stated just in this conversation alone that there's probably very little difference between the Arcturian genders, and they're somewhat sexually compatible with humans. I assume they can't have offspring though, but it's very weird to imagine what that would mean. The only other things we know about the Arcturians is that they did establish some kind of interstellar trade with humanity, and that there's also the Arcturian ghreth, whatever that is, which is like a disease that's communicable to human beings. Maybe sexually transmitted, just saying. But this opens up a bigger issue with this movie. The xenomorphs are not the only aliens that exist in this universe. We already know there's Arcturians, and what Hudson says here...
Is this going to be a stand-up fight, sir, or another bug hunt?
Implies that they have dealt with different alien species before. They even have a sign on the side of one of their ships called Bug Stomper. So this is obviously their jobs. They go out there and splat aliens all the time. But apparently they've never come across xenomorphs before. Now in the first Alien movie, they seem very excited to actually find organic life in the eggs. That's why the dude shoves his face right over the eggs, as is alien tradition. But then when he goes to bring it in the ship, Ripley says, hey, remember quarantine? We've got a certain set of rules we have to follow for this.
Something has attached itself to him. We have to get him to the infirmary right away.
What kind of thing? I need a clear definition.
An organism. Open the hatch.
Wait a minute. If we let it in, the ship could be infected. You know the quarantine procedure.
24 hours for decontamination.
It could die in 24 hours. Open the hatch.
Which again implies it's not uncommon for them to come across alien species in this universe. So how many different forms of alien life humans have come into contact with in this universe? We know there has to at least be 3, because there's the xenomorphs now, there's the Arcturians, and the bug hunt implies yet another one, because I don't think they would be doing bug hunts on Arcturian. It seems to be an alliance or peaceful relations between them. So there's got to at least be 3 alien species, 4 if you count the engineers. So are there predators as well? I don't know. Amongst the alien fans, there's also a bit of argument about what the name of our aliens actually is, because while the word xenomorph is used in this movie...
And that a xenomorph may be involved.
Excuse me, sir, a what?
A xenomorph.
That word just means xeno meaning alien and morph meaning form, so alien form. It's just a fancy way of saying alien life form. And I think the reason it's put into this scene is this commander, who we all know is kind of thinks of himself as above the regular soldiers. So he's kind of throwing in like his fancy college educated language to sort of separate himself, put him above everyone else again. I think it's put in the story to indicate that, not so much to add something to the lore of these aliens. We officially do not yet have a proper name for the aliens, but xenomorph is commonly the word that most people use now. But as we've mentioned, James Cameron uses certain tricks of the trade to get around problems and lack of resources, such as in the scene with the hallway fight with the auto guns. Because it was supposed to be a scene where it's wall-to-wall aliens and they only had 6 suits, they didn't know how to shoot it, so they figured they'll just have the guns shooting and they'll cut back to the rest of them watching the count of bullets slowly going down. But this actually works, because looking at the numbers going down and knowing that the aliens are approaching and getting closer and closer to them, that really helps to sort of crank up the tension because you can't see what's happening. It's kind of the same situation like in Jaws, where in the big finale of Jaws, Steven Spielberg wanted to have the shark visible all the time, but the puppet wasn't working, so instead he came up with this idea of the barrels, so they could keep filming even though they didn't have the puppet, and it actually helps. It adds to the movie, it adds more tension for when we finally do see the shark. Same thing here with the hallway fight, so it's another example of how lack of resources could sometimes be an advantage because it forces you to be more creative with the little that you have. There's also a few quick kind of subliminal shots, like at the very end when Ripley is hanging there and the Queen has got her by the foot and they're both almost getting sucked out into space. Just for a split second, it looks like Ripley's arm actually tears off. But then when she climbs up, we see it hasn't. That's because it's a subliminal sign that Ripley felt like her arm was just about to rip off. So it's like a mind trick there. See, stuff like that is why James Cameron is fantastic. Another thing I picked up watching this, James Cameron seems to have issues with elevators in his movies.
You now have 4 minutes to reach minimum safe distance.
Can you press the button for the top floor, please? Thank you.
Eat this!
I don't know what that is. Maybe he just doesn't like waiting for elevators, so it always sort of works its way into his movies. Who knows? So you guys voted last week that you wanted this video. Well, when I early checked it, this one was ahead in the voting, and I started work and then the voting flipped around the other way later on. So yeah, I'll do Spider-Man 2 next week because that did end up winning. But of course, I'll work my way through both franchises with mega reviews, switching between one and another. But look, if you enjoy these videos and you want to help the channel grow, probably best thing you could do would be to share this video or others that are favorites of mine that I've done on your social media. Share it on your Facebook, share it on your Twitter, share it with your friends, because if you enjoy this, odds are a lot of your friends also enjoy this kind of stuff, and YouTube is cutting back on how often it recommends your videos to new people now, so if you guys could help me out, that'd really help the channel grow. But yeah, Spider-Man 2 mega review next week. I find it very interesting to look at movies like this of like iconic directors back in the early days when they were still unknown and were fighting to survive. That seems to be when movie directors, or just any form of artist, seems to do their best work. For some reason, once they actually achieve success because of their best work, their creativity tends to dry up. I don't know why, maybe it's just some kind of weird trick of the universe, but it's interesting to see that. Like Steven Spielberg himself has said when he goes back and looks at Jewel, the movie that he made over the course of like 14 days. He filmed it all, did it all together, and Steven Spielberg has now said if he wanted to go back and try and redo that again, he couldn't do it. Like, even with all the resources at his disposal, everything he has, he could not do it today, what he did back then, because he's a different person now. He was much more hungry back then. I think it's interesting with James Cameron, this time period in his life, and he still has made several good movies after that, but that was clearly his creative peak, and now he's kind of into the whole Avatar thing. I mean, they're fine, I guess. But I do wonder if we'll ever see this version of James Cameron come back again. Can you ever be reborn creatively in this way? Maybe it wouldn't work even if he would. Maybe it'd be too 80s for everyone. But Aliens, fantastic movie. Full credit to James Cameron. Nobody believed he could do it at the time, but he did it, and it's awesome. So thanks for watching, guys, and if you want to check out more videos like this, click on any of the cards you see right here. These work on iPad and iPhone as well. And until next time, I'll see you guys in the comments.